Games going different than planned is a normal occurrence. It is pop wisdom in the RPG community that no game master plan escapes contact with the players. Usually, that is built into how I plan my stories. Rather than planning full story arcs, I plan inciting incidents, characters to interact with, and general ideas of where a story's trajectory may head. I develop a strong intention for the game, but try to let the game be whatever it needs to be. Despite this, I was recently shocked at how differently a game played out compared to what I planned. The session was for a D&Disney one-shot as a free community game, and thanks to my players and Patreon patrons for their support. All of my D&Disney games have the same basic concept. The spirit of the Horned King has escaped the Black Cauldron and is attempting to regain his corporal power. The Blue Fairy gathers together Disney heroes and villains to stop him. In this case, the story I had prepared involved the Horned King making a deal with Hades to be granted his blessing to return to the land of the living. For the session, I had multiple challenges set up, from defeating Cerberus to having to travel the spirit-filled river Styx. Once the party gets to Hades, they could attempt to subdue him, or more likely, Hades would inform the party of his deal with the Horned King. Hades wanted the Spectre to acquire flowers from a shrine of Demeter to give to his wife Persephone. This transitions a bit from Disney into mythology, but I had recently included a priest of Demeter in a Arborean planescape plot, and it was on my mind. Anyway, if the party can acquire the flowers instead, Hades will help them instead of the Horned King. They could beat him to the shrine, intercept on the way back, whatever they wanted to do. But that was the general plot I had ready for the D&Disney one-shot. For these games, I have over 40 pre-made Disney characters made into 5e D&D sheets. Players are welcome to make their own, but I clearly enjoy this concept, so I have as many characters provided as possible. Occasionally, I will have a player that wants to make their own, but they want some direction in how to make a particular character. In this case, the character was Bruno. Now, I couldn't talk about Bruno. Mainly because I hadn't seen Encanto yet. So, I had a movie to watch, technically for work. Within a couple days, I had my suggestions in. The player was specifically wanting to know if there was something other than a divination wizard, which was good. While a div whiz would give the literal portents, it also gave many spells, which would have been hard to all flavor into Bruno. Instead, I suggested a College of Whispers bard with the magic split between animal-talking general Disney shticks, and then a mixture of divination and foreboding gloom, really focusing on how people responded to Bruno rather than specific future sight. My only real dismay was I couldn't fit the augury spell within my D&Disney limitations. Nevertheless, my suggestions were made, and we move on to game day. D&Disney games tend to be hit or miss. Some of my absolute best games I've ever played with strangers have been D&Disney games. It is so easy to take RPGs too seriously and trying to play unique, invested characters. I know, because I do it, and the way I run my narrative campaigns supports the mindset. D&Disney games shirk off that mindset for lighthearted, movie-referencing fun and a story that is fundamentally austere. I find the games an absolute blast. The only issue is there is a slim Venn diagram of people that play a ton of RPGs online and people who love Disney movies. For this session, I had a few people interested, but only 2 people that fully signed up. And of those 2 people, only one showed up. And that was Bruno. Solo player games are not uncommon, but they definitely play differently than a full party. Looking at what I had prepared, and the character present, some changes needed to be made. The biggest change ended up being system. While nothing prevents a single-player D&D game, I wanted a fair game with interesting encounters. While I could have attempted to quickly water down Cerberus and the river Styx, diluting down to a single 3rd level character would have removed the teeth from the situation. Additionally, 5e is a pretty binary game for success and failure, and combat is quite segmented and slow. I have plenty of tricks to deal with those elements, but it was quickly looking like fortifying a screwdriver to be used as a hammer. Part of D&D's strengths is tactical gameplay with clear cause-effect rules for a handful of people. It can be used in a free-form call-and-response manner for beats, but if the entire game is going to be that, I should just use a different game. The player was kind enough to try out a game system they had never played before. This also meant that both of us sacrificed the time spent into making a 5e Bruno as a sunk cost in favor of a new experience. In the end, the exchange was an undeniable profit, and I wouldn't have traded our solo Dungeon World run for a full-partied regular D&Disney. Keeping the core plot, we heavily changed the perspective and viewed it through a green-tinted glass. The Blue Fairy brought Bruno to the base of Mount Olympus, but rather than any heroics, the only thing she asked was for Bruno to give her time to find other heroes to deal with the problem. In descending into the underworld, Bruno slipped down a slope and crashed in front of Cerberus. A frantic fast talk and sway avoided immediate canine contact, and Bruno fled down the shore of the Styx until he needed to find passage across Hades' underground lake to his skull fortress. The ferryman, Karen, came to call. Karen was surprised to see a living mortal and asked for something of living life in exchange for passage. Bruno produced one of his sister's healing buñuelas, which was accepted. In getting into Hades' palace, Bruno encountered the all-seeing fates, which ended up being a lot of flirting about having Bruno join them due to his powers. Eventually, Hades made his way in, rather upset. Bruno wanted to convince Hades to hang out with him for a few days to prevent any return of the Horned King. Hades agreed to a hangout day if Bruno could help him with his wife. See, the Horned King had already been by to talk business. This would have been fine, except it was date night, and Persephone was not having it. If Bruno could get him out of hot water, Hades would hang out tomorrow, maybe even get Papa Pedro involved. To be honest, this development was so much better than the race to the prize motive I had planned, and the addition of the Fates fit perfectly with Bruno. As planned, Bruno ends up at the ancient shrine of Demeter, but before he took the natural bouquet, he made an offering of another one of Julietta's buñuelos at the shrine. Along with agriculture, Demeter is also the deity of hearth and home. Needless to say, when the Horned King came calling with a reversal of the interception plotline, Demeter set down a wood-woad guardian to help out. Bruno and the Guardian defeated the undead Minotaur the Horned King brought along, but Bruno was put in a tough position of needing to abandon the woad to its doom to save himself. In returning to Hades, he found the Lord of the Underworld pacing in greater anxiety. Bruno was shoved into the den to see Persephone on the magical conch and bird telephone with her mother, hearing about a recent mishap at her shrine. Luck and fate were on Bruno's side, as he presented the bouquet with a field mice circus production that went over wonderfully with the flower child. This story was a more nuanced Disney mashup than I could have ever planned. I was already planning on straying from Disney with the inclusion of Persephone and Demeter as contextualizing players for the MacGuffin. After focusing the story purely on Bruno, a combination of coincidences and family motifs developed the one-shot into a poignant story. The non-hero that the Blue Fairy gathered to help gain her time was the perfect person to fulfill the story rather than just overcome it. This story was not what I planned it to be. This story existed the moment the characters and already present motifs were put on the same table. In the moment, it seemed miraculous and incredible to see take form. However, the puzzle pieces already had their picture inscribed across them. Had other characters or rules been forced into the puzzle, it wouldn't have fit together. I had foreseen a different outcome that was destroyed by the supposed misfortune of low player turnout. In the end, it was that fortune that let the true story blossom. And that is my SendingKenku. Parts of yourself will perfectly mesh with how life develops around you. Don't let additional factors complicate those moments. Let them blossom while they can.